a little bit of research on ballot measures. I did my best to try to investigate who the candidates were, but oftentimes all I went by was what was in the voter's pamphlet. But a few years ago, or just following the measures that are in the Oregon legislation. And so, based on that, and also the other thing that really made me want to bring this event together with several other people in this room who helped, was I've just been seeing this huge divide happening at the local level, the state level, and national. And we may not agree on everything, but I just felt like we should all hear from everyone who's participating in, for representing us. And so I really wanted the opportunity that all of us, no matter how you're registered, how you vote, that you get to hear from all of the candidates that want to represent us. And with that in mind, we do have candidates both from the Democrat and Republican Party here tonight. And I just ask all of you as members of the audience to be really respectful. And these candidates, some of them have driven a long ways to be here. They're giving up of their time so that we can hear from them. So I just really want us to be conscientious of that. And the last thing I want to mention is because this was just a few people who we're not the money people that live in this county. We're like the working class, middle class citizens that put this on, and it did cost a few dollars. And so if you are able to do so, we do have a donation in the back. We kind of suggested like $10 a person, but whatever you can afford if you're able to do so. So we appreciate that. And so next, I'm going to introduce Judge Jennifer Grant, who she's going to go over the guidelines, and she's going to be our moderator for the evening. And thank you, Jennifer.
Thank you very much. So I've lived here for 28 years myself, native Oregonian, but moved to Columbia County 28 years ago, which I'm very fully aware does not make me a native in Columbia County, but I do my best to fit in. And I was on the circuit court bench for 13 and a half years, and am very pleased to be moderating tonight. I'm not really doing, the candidates are going to do all the work. They're going to be talking, I'm not. But I am going to go over the rules before we get started so everybody understands. And I just want to say how tremendously important these kinds of gatherings are. I believe this country was founded on the ideas that we make better decisions about our society and how we should run things if we speak civilly to one another. And that's what we're all here to do tonight. So I thank you very much for being here and participating. So the rules are that this not be a debate, but this be a forum. So each of the candidates will respond to the questions, but are not to comment on any of the other candidates or their responses, and we will be listening, and we will stop you if you do that. I will moderate and be the only person. I never had to use the gavel in court, but I did have to use the look. That did happen. So I'm supposed to be the only person communicating with the candidates. They're not to talk to one another. Photos, recordings, and video streams are allowed and encouraged. Please do. Time allowances will be monitored and enforced strictly. Sherry's going to be keeping the time and holding up the minutes when the warnings have to happen. Actually, she'll be just telling you when your time, what your time is. It's not really a warning, it's just here you are. Okay. And the only candidates that are allowed to speak tonight are candidates who RSVP'd and let us know that they were coming. So the format, just so that you know, is that each candidate, and we do have a candidate representative here for Melissa Bush. Each candidate will get 3 minutes to introduce him or herself and share the top 3 goals for once in office. I will then ask each of our 5 candidates 4 questions, one at a time, and each candidate will then get 2 minutes to respond. After those questions, we will select about 6 of the audience submitted questions, and again, each candidate will have 2 minutes to respond. And then afterwards, each candidate will have 1 minute for any final comments. And afterwards, people are encouraged to stick around, Sherry?
Yes.
Stick around and mingle
Yep.
after too? Okay.
Yep.
And we will have a very quick break in the middle of all this so that we can stretch. Was there a question?
One on the basket.
Okay. I think we're ready to start then.
I forgot to mention one thing. I know in Columbia County, we have a lot of non-affiliated voters and independent voters. And, you know, we respect that and understand that. However, only Republicans and Democrats get to vote in the primaries. So if you hear a candidate tonight that you really like where they stand and you want to support them in the primaries, we have two ladies at the back, Ruth and Alta, one from each party, that can help you look at your registration status. And if you were so kind, you can update it. And you can update it just through the primaries and then change it back to non-affiliated or independent if you so desired. It's really simple. It takes like 30 seconds to do. So just wanted to remind everyone of that. So I'm going to hand the microphone over to Jennifer. We'll start with the questions, and then I'll run the microphone because we only have one. So I think we'll just start, and then next time we'll start. Yeah, and then we'll start second and go on.
Are we?
Oh, their introductions.
Yeah.
Their
Oh,
introductions
yes,
first.
we're starting with
3
them.
minutes each.
Thank you. Yeah, I knew that.
Well, this is fun. Thank you for the invitation to be here. My name is Suzanne Weber, and I am the current representative for House District 32, and I am running for Senate seat in District 16, replacing Senator Betsy Johnson. I'll tell you a little bit about myself. I'm a 50-year resident of Tillamook. I have 30 of those years were spent at Wilson School, just about half a block from where I live, in first, second, and third grade in a special class. I have 5 children in a blended family. I have 8 grandchildren, because that's what they are. I have a dog. His name is Dog Martin. He's named after Doc Martin on TV. Unfortunately, I lost my husband 6 years ago to pancreatic cancer. It left a big hole in my heart. I have a real belief in community service and giving back to my community. I was a city councilor for 8 years, and I was the mayor of Tillamook for 10 years, and I really enjoyed that experience. Talking about goals, I was very fortunate to be assigned to 4 different committees: education, housing, early childhood, and health. And I worked passionately on all of those committees to make sense of what was being proposed and to either advocate or to try and change for the better what was being brought. So I would tell you that I am passionate about, and my goals involve education, infrastructure, because you know our roads and our bridges and our culverts are all crumbling. Our water systems, our sewer systems are all in danger and they all need repair. So that's 2 things. And then I am also really concerned about government accountability and what government does with our tax money, how it comes back to us, how it can be used to make our lives better. So thank you.
Thank you. I'll have the honor to represent Class 9 Westward, communities known for hard work, volunteerism, and our unique location between the economic centers of Astoria and Portland. The lack of investment and closing of the industry has been harsh on our communities, forcing us to deal with the label blighted by the state. Now, blight is a term we stole from ag. It means disease marked by lesions, withering, and death. As one Class 9 Foundation member wrote, our once vital small business district is all but dead. Remember that, all but dead. Homes are becoming dramatically more expensive as family wage jobs are leaving town. Our roads and infrastructure remain underfunded, while access to healthcare and career education are miles away. Now here's the thing that I've learned about blight. Unlike plants, Communities are not dead. I know that our funding of a small business development center will go a long way, because I helped launch my own small business with one support. And it's just as important that we secure support from our state. I'm Logan Lansing, and I'm a community advocate and small business owner, supporting our working families and first responders. In my small business, I work with nonprofits. My largest client is the Emergency Volunteer Corps, where we prepare and train our communities to prepare for natural disaster. I serve as director of an economic renewal agency called TURA. There, we invest taxpayer dollars into our small businesses and our communities. This is the role of the legislator. I'm running to represent us on the North Coast and Class Canai as your state representative. And over the years, I've knocked on thousands of doors in our communities to understand our needs and to advocate for housing, healthcare, and education, my 3 goals. My family had such a difficult time finding a home here that I knew I had to do something. I then fought for a ballot measure that would provide quality workforce housing. My work as a patient coordinator further opened my eyes to the needs of our community. I saw firsthand how people defer care due to insurance gaps. I was one of these patients. And knowing how families shuffle medical debt inspires me to declare that quality, affordable healthcare is a right. I took this conviction and volunteered to organize and protect the Oregon health plan that I didn't even belong to, but my patients did. When I went to community college to earn my degree in business, I went to the state capitol to advocate for career and technical education funding. I'm running because you deserve a dedicated community leader with a track record of advocating for our community. And I'm looking forward to answering your questions, to listen, to learn, and keep the North Coast our home. I'm Logan Lanty, and I'm asking for your vote because we have so much left to do. Thank you.
I'm Glenn Gaither. I'm running for same House seat, 32nd District. If you see me chewing something, it's because I've got a little case of cancer going on right now, and the medications are drying me out really bad, so I want to apologize for that in advance. I'm the father of 6 kids. The oldest is 42, the youngest is 12, and I'm a senior on a fixed income. That was not by choice. Back in 2016, I was diagnosed with stage 4 pancreatic cancer, a real tough cancer to beat, and pretty much a nightmare, but there's hope for people out there with this type of cancer, because I know the guy that has a 70% cure rate on that cancer. And so I spend a lot of my day in the morning talking to cancer patients of every kind. If you have a doctor that's telling you that you're terminal or that you got a time limit, please reach out to me and call me, because that is not always necessarily true. I started my working life in 1980 as a teenager in the United States Marine Corps. I served in the Army as well. When I got out of that, I went into commercial diving for a short period of time, but didn't feel like I was contributing to society in the community. So I went into medical emergency services up in Seattle, where I work downtown. So I've got a lot of experience dealing with drug overdoses, drug addiction since that time. The only issue with EMS for me was children. I have an extremely weak spot for children. The only instances of PTSD I have and have to deal with are due to children and working in EMS. I can deal with gunshot wounds, car accidents, anything that happens with an adult. But if I have to go to a bad child call, it would keep me up for weeks. And I remember every one of those calls now. So I got out of EMS, worked as a fly fishing guy for a short period of time before I was hired on with the Department of Corrections in Washington State. That was an eye-opener. If you want to know why we have kids in prisons or they're going straight from school to the prison system, it's because we're graduating them without the ability to do math or read and write. The fact that this was just passed recently as a law is an admission of that. Okay? I've got all kinds of guys I work with in the prison system in their 20s, couldn't read, couldn't write, and they had high school diplomas. They were passing these guys through to get the numbers out. Washington State at that time had a 47% dropout rate, and that's insane. So one of the things that I'm going to be working on is education. I want to make sure that we absolutely protect our youngest minds from this material right here. This is sexual grooming by every law enforcement standard in the country, and it's being taught in your public schools. And this needs to stop. So this is like my number one mission. Yeah, I'm all out for the Constitution 100%. I'm going to always be constitutionally responsible. And my time's up. So I'll hand it over to my good friend Leda, who's also a commercial diver, by the way.
Thank you, Brad.
Good evening. My name is Drew Leda, and I am a candidate for Oregon's 31st House District. That includes Northwest Multnomah County, Columbia County, minus Clackamas, and Western Washington County, and a tiny little sliver of Yamhill County. I live in northwestern Multnomah County with my beautiful wife on the Multnomah Channel. As I like to tell people, as though I have a Portland address, I live on the river in the woods. I'm running for office because in the establishment of a just government, our representatives, they're supposed to watch out and protect our rights, our life, our liberty, our property, and our prosperity. It seems that government has gotten into business other than that, and representatives have oftentimes found themselves pushing agendas that are chosen among sides, seemingly, that none of which have anything to do with protecting the rights and liberties of the people who they serve in the House of Representatives. My biggest three priorities, you're going to probably be hearing a lot of this. My first goals are economic. I'm hoping to get on the Committee for Economic Recovery and Prosperity. I am a commercial diver by trade, came up through the apprenticeship program, and now I am a project planner and cost estimator for very large civil and marine construction projects. I know what makes things work, and I know what makes things stop working. It's my goal to get as much working around Oregon as we can, to act as a defender of our natural resource jobs, of which comprise a vast amount of House District 31's economy, whether we're talking about the longest riverine coast in the state of Oregon, or whether we're talking about our massive mineral reserves in the form of gravel, our agriculture, and our logging communities. All of them need to be protected because it's not just jobs we have to build in Oregon, it is careers. Big second priority for me is education. I believe that with a quality education, anybody in America is capable of rising above whatever straitened economic circumstances they might have been raised in. And it's very important to have a classically merit-based grading system to where your education system, the people paying for it, understand and know and have faith that it is the highest quality education that the state could provide. However, if parents want to opt into a private education program, I think that the money should be able to follow the student. Lastly, my goal is to maximize accessibility for the people in my district. If they ever close the Capitol down again and decide that they're not going to let people in, you will find me in a lawn chair in the rotunda. I will always be accessible to my people because the consent of the governed is how you own yourselves.
Hello, my name is Sabbath Michaelson. I'm here representing Melissa Bush, who's running for Senate District 16. She has a prior campaign event in the North Coast area of our district tonight, so she's not able to be with us, but it's important to her campaign that we always have someone somewhere. Melissa is a nurse and a mother who lives in Warren. She serves Columbia County and surrounding rural areas of Senate District 16, visiting elderly and disabled community members in their home and long-term care facilities to provide essential healthcare services. As a working mother with 3 school-aged children in public schools, she understands the challenges working families face in these unprecedented times. The work Melissa does as a nurse and her experience as a working parent gives her the comprehensive understanding of the challenges our rural and coastal communities face, as well as the opportunities we have to create healthy, thriving families we want to live in. Melissa is running for office because we need a champion who will stand up and fight for the needs of our communities, a stronger economy for working families and small businesses, bringing down the cost of living, and increasing access to affordable healthcare. Melissa is excited about this and an important race and hopes to earn your vote so that she can continue her service to the community both as a nurse and your next senator. She's sorry she was unable to join this forum this evening due to a previously scheduled campaign event, but looks forward to future forums and opportunities to reach out to all of you and to meet all of you. Please feel free to contact her via her website, her contact information, her email, her phone number. She'd be happy to set up a Zoom call or make time to meet with any of you in person. Accessibility is a huge priority to Melissa and the campaign, so please feel free. I'm going to step away at this point out of respect for the rest of the candidates and their questions. I will be available at our back table after the forum to answer any questions or hand out any literature. Thank you so much.
Good evening, my name is Anthony Sarasi. I'm running for House District 31. It's really great to be here tonight with all of you. I think out loud a lot, and I picked my daughter up from daycare and was talking over what I might want to say tonight. And she was watching very attentively, and I asked her if she had any tips, and she said, I like candy. I said, I don't think I'm going to make that a legislative priority, but if this all sounds like nonsense, let me know afterwards, and I'll tell her she was right. The things I'm most focused on, it's hard to pick three, right? There's a lot of problems in front of us, a lot of things we need to take care of, but the things I'm most focused on are making sure we have good jobs that you can support a family with, making sure you have a house you can put that family in, and making sure you can get the health care you need to keep everybody healthy. As a father myself, the health of my family is the most important thing in the world to me. And we're lucky personally that we don't have to worry as much about the housing problem, and my partner has a great job. She's a community doctor, which is really exciting. We can't get through the grocery store without 10 people being like, oh, hi, how are you? She knows everybody in town. It's wonderful. But housing, healthcare, jobs. The jobs is really interesting, in particular in this district, because North County, here in Columbia County, and South County, very different job markets, right? Agriculture, natural resource jobs, big in most of the county by land area, certainly, employs lots and lots of people. Very different situation in South County. If you're in Scappoose, where I am, if you're in St. Helens, your job situation probably looks very different. So we need to make sure that we're doing things that are going to protect jobs for everybody throughout the counties and the district, through the whole district. Using those three things as a sort of framework to think about everything else, like I said, there's so many issues you can look at. One of the things that comes up a lot in rural communities is rural broadband, right? I remember thinking 4 years ago, like, great, so your Netflix is a little slow, who really cares? But especially in the pandemic, we've noticed that people do telehealth, right? You're doing doctor's appointments online. Broadband's a real accessibility issue for that, and it becomes a healthcare issue. We see more and more people doing work remotely. Your broadband becomes a job issue. So these are the frameworks that I use to think about all the things we want to accomplish. With your help, I look forward to putting some effort into each of them and bringing my ability to address these problems to the district. Thanks.
Thank you, Anthony. Just a quick reminder to some of you have louder voices than others. Excuse me. Please put the microphone closer to your mouth so everyone in the back. The room has pretty poor acoustics, so just a reminder. Thank you.
Thanks. Okay, any reason I shouldn't just go left to right? Okay. Okay. So, Ms. Weber, I'm going to go ahead and give you the first crack here. The first candidate question is, what does medical freedom and informed consent mean to you, and how important is this? And she has 2 minutes, right? Yes. 2 minutes.
Medical freedom is very important to me, and it's very important to the members of our state. The ability to choose for oneself, self-determination in the medical field is a very impactful and personal choice, and I think that it needs to be protected as that. And the second part of the question?
Informed consent, what does it mean to you, and how important is it?
Informed consent is something that I'm not really sure of how to answer. And so I'm going to pass on that, and I will tell you that I will learn more. And so I will also share in the future my feelings about that.
I love this question. Can you all hear me okay? All right, thanks. I know I'm a little louder. So when I worked for a patient coordinator, I was in a dentist, and it's a weird title. Let me explain. It means you're in the front office, you're chatting with people as they're dealing with their insurance companies, as they're dealing with their insurance networks. You're working with your county health department to try to make sure that everyone on OHP, the Oregon Health Plan, or on Medicare, or on Medicaid, or working with VA benefits, is getting the care they want at the private or public provider that they need. Medical freedom is very important to me. I believe that the chief way we can address this issue in Oregon is by looking to expand our insurance networks. I don't think that whether you're on the public health plan, which is called the Oregon Health Plan, or if you're in VA, or if you're in a private network, you shouldn't be able to seek the community doctor or get home care from my friend Melissa or from Anthony's spouse, the community doctor, at home, whether they're private or public or whatever. That is what medical freedom means to me. And there's also vaccinations. Yes, which is a huge deal going on right now with medical freedom on that issue. It's important because I just came out of the school system. There are some diseases like measles and mumps that if we didn't have certain protections, our society would be, we would not be prospering how we are now. But we also have to think about, in the current age, we know a lot more about this than we did, so we don't have to come off as strong as we once had. Informed consent is also very important for me. I know what that means. It means that when you're going in for a procedure, you know exactly what you're getting into, and your doctor explains to you from the get-go everything that can go wrong and briefs you, if this goes wrong, what do you want me to do about it? I think that this is critical because, and I saw it with my dentist, because a routine thing like a root canal can go horribly wrong. Thank you.
Medicine. Yeah. So I'm a little bit familiar with doctor procedures and being in and out of hospitals and having surgeries and having chemo and doing all of that. For me, informed consent means that when the FDA approves a drug, if it is considered safe by the FDA, then there should be repercussions, or there should be action that citizens can take when they take a medication that causes them harm, right? With the vaccines for COVID, there is no recourse. If your child has heart damage, or your child gets sick from that vaccine, or it kills an adult, there's no legal recourse. That's not completely informed consent, because nobody really knows what's going to happen when you take this vaccine long term. We got a lot of cancer out there right now. 1.7 million new cases every year. 700,000 people a year die from cancer. Far more than COVID. So, we hear all these presidents talking about doing a moonshot for cancer. Hey, we can do the moonshot for cancer. Well, I got news for you. Dr. Nixie Chen has got the Apollo capsule and the lander in orbit around the moon. It's detaching and heading to the surface. Why aren't we promoting doctors like that? The pharmaceuticals, right? I didn't get informed consent when I took Zantac for 3 years. It was prescribed to me. Guess what? It causes pancreatic cancer. Now I'm part of that lawsuit. So just because the FDA says something's good and healthy for you doesn't exactly mean that's the truth. There's a lot more truth out there than what your government's telling you. Thank you.
Medical freedom is an essential aspect of self-ownership. It's the ability to decide what procedures you will undergo and what procedures you will not undergo. And this decision is typically predicated on informed consent. Your doctor or primary care provider telling you the chances, the statistics of what the chances are of outcomes so you can make an informed decision, because the most important thing to anybody in this room is your own life and the life of those closest to you. I believe under informed consent, we would have a lot less issues and things would be taken and understood a lot more clearly. Under strong informed consent law, you can never be made to take part in an experiment without your knowledge. You can expect that your doctor will give you a full and complete listing of the possible side effects from any procedure or product that you are going to be taking. It's about disclosure. It's about understanding that you are more than a lab rat to some big pharmaceutical interest. And I think people are getting a little bit suspicious and a little bit cautious with pharmaceuticals, because at the end of the day, they account for nearly 80% of all lobbying and 70% of all advertising revenue. I think we'd be wise to pay closer attention to the treatments on a case-by-case basis and listen to one person when it comes to your health care, and that's your doctor.
So I'll talk about informed consent first, because I think it's a lot more straightforward. Informed consent is super important, obviously. It's fundamental to your ability to make decisions about your health. And from my experience in the healthcare industry, as I said, my partner's a physician, and I've been hanging out with her for 20-something years now. I've gotten attached to lots of people at all levels, doctors, nurses, scrub techs. Everybody involved in these fields gets into it because they care about the patients. They understand that informed consent is fundamental to being able to do their jobs and to serve the people that they're there to serve. So I think it's super important, and I think everybody understands that that's important. Medical freedom is more complicated because there's so many ways that it gets attacked from all different levels. I think medical freedom is really important, but here in Oregon, I'm really thankful that, for example, we've had the good fortune to not see the same sorts of attacks we see in other states on certain types of medical freedom. Our state government has done a good job of protecting us from those elements of our political system or folks with certain ideologies who would like to go after your medical freedom and your ability to make choices about what you do with your body, especially if you're, say, a woman. That's an aspect of medical freedom that, we need to make sure that we continue to defend strongly. And I think, I'm all behind making sure that we continue to do as good a job in Oregon as we historically have done.
Thank you. So the second question for each of you, and I think it's fair to go ahead and mix this up. We'll start from right to left then, this time. How will you work to unify your district or Senate area? So Mr. Sarasi, we'll start with you.
Thank you. Yeah, we all know, we see on TV all the time, right, the split between left and right, Republicans and Democrats, rural and urban. I think especially in a district like ours, being able to address this is crucial. How do I want to address it? I've been a Democrat for 4 years. I grew up in a Republican household. I was an independent for most of my adult life, and I've been a Democrat for 4 years. I do not think any party has all the answers. I do not think any ideology has all the answers. We need to be able to listen to people with good ideas, regardless of where those ideas come from. In the short session that just wrapped up, some of the bills that I was most excited about that they managed to get passed, there were 3 bills that did a really nice job about improving health insurance coverage for people in the state. Especially for infants and newborns, right? Just 3 healthcare bills, really excellent bills. All 3 of them had Democrat and Republican chief sponsors. We need to see more of that. Sorry. Okay, excellent. I was like, wait a minute. We need to see more of that. Those bills are better, because both of those parties, people from both parties got together and said, this is a real issue, we need to do something about it. We need to be able to address it, not just, I'm gonna say no to everything you say, and if you don't, give me what I want, I'm gonna take my ball and go home. So I promise that I will show up to work and do the work by talking with the people who, I might not agree with everything that they have to say, but we all want to address these problems. I think listening to people and saying, where do we have similar interests and how can we address those is the key to this question in my mind.
I think that's a very interesting question. What can we do in our community or our district to provide unity across such a separate gradient of people? I think that question has been asked once. It was asked in the 1760s. We have all these 13 different colonies. How are they going to, how are we going to come together? What are we going to do to gain our independence? And then they kind of understood that that is how you gain unity, is through acknowledging the independence of these different issues, these different causes, and these different agendas, and using every bit of rational reasoning that you can to deal with them on a case-by-case basis. Another important thing to do in the name of unity is to discuss with the other members of the legislature the ideas behind what we're looking to legislate, because in a lot of ways, job as a representative is a lot like being a juror in a criminal case, because every law passed in Oregon gives a potential sentence on the Oregonian people. And I think, bearing in mind that our primary job is to protect the rights, the life, the liberty, the prosperity, and the property of our citizens, it really becomes a lot easier to help unify, because you're helping protect everyone's rights independently. That's the way the Founding Fathers ruled. I think there was something to it. That's what I'm going to do as well.
Stop putting people in boxes. You know what I'm talking about? There's all these groups out there that are talking about their rights being violated. You have the LGBTQ, you have the minority groups, you've got people with different faiths, different religions. Every single one of those people has their individual rights protected by the Constitution. We need to hammer home the message. I don't care how you identify, I don't care what skin color you are, you're protected under the Constitution. Your rights are intact. No one's going to violate them. And if they do, take them to court. We've seen that happen in action. So the first thing to do is to start looking at each other and understanding the similarities and not the differences. I've worked in state and federal government for years and years and years. We look at each other, that was Bob, that's Mary, that's Susan, that's Joe, and that was it. There wasn't any racism involved. Stop telling kids that they have to either be an oppressor or oppressed. These kids are young and impressionable minds. Let them be kids. Let them play with each other. Let them hang out. Let them go home together. Do sleepovers. The things that we did as kids. We never had an issue with these things before. Now, I'm not saying that there's no racism out there, but it's in individual people. And I find it shocking that the teachers' union 2 summers ago picked white nationalism as the biggest issue in our public schools. It's not. Quit focusing on race, focusing on the individual as a separate entity. So the best way to do that is discussion. And if we have discussions that are open and honest, without attacks from one side or the other, you're going to get through this. Okay? Treat people with respect, tell your children to do it, and then get on with it.
Thank you. I think there's 2 points to this question. What will you do to help unification in the legislature, and what will you do personally, maybe even as a community leader, to help unify your electorate, or at least find some common ground? Maybe not the best for speechcraft, but I'm going to try to tackle those at the same time. By working through, okay, when I was going to the community college, and I've served as president of our student union, I met many people returning to school, returning to the classroom to pursue a trade, or just entering the classroom after high school. They were honored, whether they got scholarship or they decided to go in because they decided that they wanted to earn a certificate in welding. Regardless, they all have the same values in mind. They're looking to support their family, or what would become of their family. They're looking to make sure that we have the right. They're looking to make sure that we have access to health, the education we need. My friend Sally, when she was going on and had to miss her pre-med exam because she couldn't get a caregiver for a child for that day because they moved east to teach for a living, she had to work and return to the classroom a year later. So I went to our state capitol and advocated for career and technical education and for child care protection services. Because in the legislature, what you do is you bring those personal stories in. We don't care about all these things happening in the national media because that doesn't directly impact us here at home. When we talk about unification, what we're talking about is the kitchen table issues. Housing, healthcare, the economy, and through the economy, jobs. That's what we do in the legislature.
This question is very near and dear to my heart. I worked on the city council for 8 years, the mayor for 10 years, and amazingly enough, when I decided to run for office, people were surprised to find out that indeed I was a Republican. Because what I did was work to make sure that what was happening was the best for the community and the best for the people that lived there. And in the legislature, I found that that was also the way you had to work. You had to gain trust with the other side, and then you had to make sure that they understood what it was that you wanted to get across, what the purpose of the bill was. And we did that through committee work, and we did that for things like the Women's Caucus, where we'd get together every Wednesday and Republicans and Democrats, and we'd talk about our lives. I think I was very successful in the fact that I had support from Rachel Armitage, who was Senator Johnson's replacement, in working on the Highway 6 bill, and I will tell you that there was not one vote in the Senate or the House against that bill. She worked very hard at making sure it was passed, and so did I. Representative Nathanson, a Democrat, and myself worked very hard on a testing bill. Senator Dembro, a Democrat also, and I worked very hard on an education bill. And it wasn't who we were and what party we were, it was what was going to be the best. It was whether we were going to have enough teachers and enough substitutes and enough aides in the classroom. It was whether or not we were going to be giving valid testing on a statewide basis. That's what working together is. And I feel that that is what is at the crux of what we need to do.
Okay, candidates, your next question is, do you believe that there are decisions being made at the state level that would be better left to local governments? And we'll keep mixing this up. Mr. Gaither, why don't we let you start this question, and then we will move to your left.
Absolutely, especially in our local schools. There was a point where I remember during the COVID lockdowns and after schools opened back up where students were still forced to wear masks at school, which I think is absolutely wrong. At the time, the governor came out and told us that, well, you know what, we're going to let local school districts decide how that's done. So local school districts started deciding how that was done, and a lot of them decided, well, we're going to get rid of the mask mandate. As soon as that was found out by our mighty federal government, they cracked down and they were like, well, you know, if you don't follow our protocols, we're gonna fine the teachers $500 a day. We're gonna fine the superintendent $250,000, and it turned into an issue of force, coercion, threats, and intimidation in order to get them to comply. That's what this whole thing has been about, right? People getting fired for not taking the vaccine. You don't threaten and coerce your citizens into obedience. That's never a good idea. So I think that all schools should be handled at the local level. We have school boards. When the school boards started taking a little bit too much power, the state came back and said, well, let's look at possibly reducing the authority of the school boards as far as firing principals and or superintendents that didn't agree with it. The school board should have all the authority over the local school. I went to Clatskanie when I was a child and ended up in Napa and Napa High. And I've been working there with the Napa Parents Organization, which is a large group of people, pushing back against school mandates, sex education as it is now, which isn't sex education but sexual indoctrination, and on vaccine and mask mandates. So let parents decide what's going to happen. Let the school boards make decisions at their local schools. And, you know, there's so much more that we can do if we have the freedom to do it.
Legislation at the most local level possible is how you keep your legislation by and for the effective. Having continual centralization of authority usually leads to one-size-fits-nobody policies that end up doing greater harm to our smaller divisions in Oregon. My job, in many ways, I view it as, especially in Oregon, where the state tries to do too much and oftentimes overlooks the local experts that are found locally. I like to joke with the county commissioner candidates that part of my job responsibility as state representative is giving them more to do. Because that is really where things need to be handled as often as possible. Anytime that you have a state that is going to step in and say, we're going to handle everything, even down to the most local level possible, you don't end up with a government that is run by the consent of the governed. We watched, as Glenn was saying, as they tried to push through, it was SB 1521, where they tried to take away the school boards, our independent school districts. They wanted to make our superintendents employees of somebody else. That would literally serve to take the independent out of our independent school districts. Other aspects that the state has tried to reach too far is with emergency management. I believe that Casey Garrett and the other county commissioners are better equipped to figure out how to handle emergencies in Columbia County than Salem bureaucrats. So I would absolutely lean towards localization over centralization because I prefer my government where I can get my hands on it.
One of the things that makes the United States really unusual as countries go is that it was founded on this principle of federalism. This obviously is at a higher level than this question is asking, but throughout our history as a country, the balance of power between the federal government, the state government, your counties, your town has shifted over and over again because we recognize that there is no one answer that works forever. Are there any things that are being done at the state level that should be done at the local level? Probably. Certainly the communication could be better. I agree with Drew that local experts aren't necessarily consulted the way they should be. But when you look at emergency services, there are, for example, Columbia County Fairgrounds did temporary housing for folks who were displaced by wildfires. The wildfires did not happen in Columbia County. The wildfires did not happen in our district. But Columbia County was able to provide this service. This is something that is not constrained to the county level, and we need to make sure that the state government has a role in coordinating these responses. There are things that have shifted one way or another for 200 years. I don't expect that we have exactly the right answer today, and I would be shocked if we don't see this shift again.
Thank you. Yes, I do believe that decisions are being made at the state level that need to be made at the local level. One of those is vacation rentals. I think that each municipality has the right to decide how they handle their the number and the kind of vacation rentals that they have. And this is something that there is a desire by the state to be able to manage that. Why can't a municipality handle its own problems, especially surrounding vacation rentals? There was, as a result of what happened in Newburgh and in Albany, there was an education bill that has already been referred to that would make it so that school board members had to have a great deal of education that came from COSA, the school board organization, and would also require that the school boards, that the school districts pay for this additional education. And this was beyond what they needed to have for ethics. And it also wanted to make sure that the school district could not fire a superintendent, which was pointed out to me by many school districts, that many school districts had already taken care of this because all of a superintendent's working conditions were addressed in a contract. And so the contract was going to take precedent over the bill that was being introduced. Right now the bill passed. The majority felt that it was important that the superintendents be protected on a higher level instead of being what the community and what the local people wanted to have happen.
There are issues that deserve to be held at the state, at the county, at the city, and in the county, but only for the unincorporated areas. I take a pragmatic approach to this question. When we look at the school board issues, there are portions of those hiring and firing decisions at each and every level. The last thing we want to see is a great educator who's spent their great educator or administrative person who's spent their entire life in service in one district. All of a sudden, the town comes with pitchforks or an issue they had nothing to do with, right? Are they going to get fired because the county board members are going to be swayed by people with pitchforks? I'm speaking not hyperbole. This is why we have a federated government, and this is why we protect the rights and the livelihoods of people at different levels. This is why we create standards for education, both at the school board level and at the state level, and working with the United States, who decides how much money we're going to put into disability services. Our entire system for helping people with disabilities, almost all of it is paid for by the federal government. And the only reason why that's the case is because here at the local level, we couldn't find the muster to do it ourselves. This is why I love the federated system of America, not just in the United States of America, but also in Oregon. This is why when we talk about vacation rentals, I agree. It should be the municipalities and the counties working together for these things. But I also agree that, hey, if you have 3 municipalities working together, maybe they should have a local option across multiple jurisdictions so they can act as a single body. That way all of your housing stock isn't shifting from community to community. I'm a pragmatic person, and that's how I'll be in the legislature.
state law or statute is a priority for you to help implement? And what existing law or statute would you work to remove? That's a two-part question.
Can you repeat that, please?
Sure. What state law or statute is a priority for you to help implement? And what existing law or statute would you work to remove? And I think we'll start with Mr. Lady this time, and we will go toward his right. We'll go that way.
One thing we heard a lot about tonight was unification and trying to bridge the divide, so to speak. I don't like to bring statistics up very much, but I was recently informed by legislative friends in a district south of me that something like over 70% of bills proposed and worked through in the Oregon State Legislature are passed on bipartisan grounds. Now, forgive me, but when things pass on bipartisan grounds more than 70% of the time, you're gonna have a hard time finding things to remove wholesale. There's gonna be a lot of little tweaks. So I'm gonna be speaking about one bill and one recent change that we did at the legislative level that I'm really passionate about, and that is emergency response. You know, from the wildfires we've been seeing, to flooding, to landslides, I recognize that this affects more so along the Columbia River and the coastal areas of our community, but it also affects us in Columbia County because we have to deal with refugees, and we have to deal with taxes that are continually being spent on emergency response rather than our schools. What we did recently in the legislature was shift the responsibility for emergency management from the military department, yes, Oregon has a military department, to the Department of Health and Human Services. I think this is amazing, and I've seen it in action in my job with an emergency preparedness nonprofit, and I think we need to go further and accelerate it. This is why. The military department has been focused almost as a reserve arm, and it works closely with Oregon State Police. Their focus is enforcement, which is great. We need that in emergency response. Health and Human Services, it looks at the entire community. It looks at why do we have disease? How are we feeling? Do we have access to the health care we need? Where are our roads? What are the conditions of our roads? Can we get people to safe evacuation? And what is the status of our wildfire protection? It works with all the agencies. That's why I want to see us working further to empower the good folk in DHS.
Thank you. So what would I work to make a priority? We recently went through a rather painful decision concerning redistricting within our state. And it was left to the legislature to be able to work this out and make sure the districts were even. There was a lot of political rhetoric that was really bantered around, and it made friends in some places and enemies in others, and still some of the lines for the redistricting are not very clear. They're not taking into consideration like communities. And so the one thing that I would definitely work for was to make a committee that was involved and made the decisions about redistricting to be not a legislative committee, but an independent committee that would work toward making it fair with the census information. And take the political rhetoric out of it, take the fighting out of it. That would be one thing that I would work strongly for. And and then the other thing that I am really passionate about is graduation standards. You know that we eliminated graduation standards, and we have to reinstall those. We have to decide what they are. We have to decide what's important, and that needs to happen.
we've talked about SAT scores, and are they necessary, are they not necessary? Going forward, is that something that we as a state are going to address or not? So, thank you.
In terms of what I would treat as a priority to get past, again, hard to pick just one. We have a lot of things to work on, but I would say we need better mental health coverage and access to care. We do a pretty good job with healthcare overall here in Oregon. Could be better, but we're doing a good job and we're continually improving it. But mental health access and care is in a really bad shape. According to Mental Health America, which is an organization that, among other really great work, does rankings of access and needs state by state every year, Oregon is like, I think, 47th for adults and 45th for children. Particularly youth in rural communities, it's a real problem. And we're failing our youth in particular, but all of our citizens in that area, and we need to work on that. I would treat that as my first priority. In terms of things to get rid of, I don't have something in mind actually, but what I will say is when we get rid of things here in Oregon, I think we do better than most states about addressing our problems. We are ahead of the curve on decriminalization of drugs, which is great. Getting that out of the criminal justice system is a real healthcare win and a real justice win. But we haven't done a great job of dealing with people who have, suffered from that in the past. We just got rid of our non-unanimous jury verdicts, which we were the only state in the country doing that, which was a terrible thing. We got rid of that, which is great, but now we still haven't figured out how to deal with all the people who have suffered from that in the past, who were convicted through non-unanimous juries. So I would say the things that we have gotten rid of, let's make sure we're doing a good job of addressing the harms that our mistakes have caused in the past.
That's a fantastic question. I'll start with the bills or laws that I would look to have appended or changed. I think it's very important, as I said before, to protect the rights and liberties of everybody in this state. I also believe that access to a high-quality education that is graded on the merits of the student's achievement is an essential aspect of that. So we need to bring back educational standards. We need to overturn that law. I think SB 554, the red flag laws, any laws where they've taken and tried to take away an inalienable right that they ended with 4 of the strongest words in the English language, shall not be infringed, and reclaim them back to the intending intent of the founders. I think some of the bills that I would be looking to lean into and support would be bills like HB 4053, Suzanne Weber's Let's Get Highway 6 looked at. I believe that Oregon's infrastructure is largely failing. I do civil projects for a living. A lot of our infrastructure really needs a lot of work. I think that any of the money, any of the legislation that we've passed that foolishly wasted the public funds paid for by Oregonian citizens, and we need to provide for them the classical infrastructure that actually makes the state go. Our state transportation, for example, is stuck in the 1970s. I think we can do a lot better to grow our economy and fix our education system and restore people's inalienable rights. Those are my main goals.
Am I that guy that's too loud? I just want to make sure. I've got tinnitus really bad, so. First thing I would do, I would drop measure 110 faster than you could blink. This has allowed the drug cartels and organized crime syndicates to flood our streets with hard drugs. We have methamphetamine, cocaine, all making a comeback. If you look around our communities, you see homeless camps everywhere. The largest issue in those camps is drug abuse. That's what's keeping a lot of people homeless. We got children dying left and right from overdoses of fake oxy, which is basically cocaine and fentanyl. Fentanyl comes from China. It goes to Mexico, then travels the red carpet that the governor laid down all the way to the Mexican border to invite these guys in here. When you told people that hard drugs were no longer going to be an issue and that the worst thing that could happen is a ticket, you call a phone number and it goes away, you basically gave permission to every person out there to use this stuff. The cartels paid attention. You opened up the freest market that they've ever seen. You hear about violence in Portland. They constantly hammer on, oh, it's gun violence, gun violence, gun violence. It's not gun violence. It is gang violence, and they don't even want to talk about it. When the cops are still in the neighborhood after the latest shooting, which is pretty much one a day, talking about looking for retaliation, that tells you that there's a gang war going on. Why doesn't the media want to cover that? Why don't they want to tell you that there are Sereños, Norteños, El Saberchucha, MS-13, Caballeros Templaros moving drugs in Portland? Who do you think's causing all the violence? Because if they told you that these were the gangs that were doing it and the stuff was getting imported from Mexico through the cartels, you may not be so friendly with their amnesty policy and that 1-800 number that they can dial to get their butts from keep their posteriors from getting ejected from the state when they get caught committing a felony crime. That needs to go away too. Thank you.
Okay, we're gonna just take a quick couple-minute break just for them to stand up, get some more food and refreshments, use the restroom, but please come.
Okay, candidates. These questions are from the audience. The first question is, what actions do you think Oregon should take on climate change? We're going to start? We'll go ahead and start with Ms. Weber and go the normal way.
Thank you. It's my understanding that climate change is something that we have to deal with as a nation and as the world. And I think that we're really falling down on that. But I think that Oregon has done some really good things to address climate and the global changes that are happening. I had a meeting not too long ago with a whole crew of log truck drivers. And I was asking them about diesel costs, trucks, and how they were running and how this was impacting them. And one of the guys told me that the new diesel trucks, the new diesel log trucks that are out there, are so far superior to even the automobiles that are on the road right now that are using regular gasoline, as far as being able to protect the environment and burn their fuel effectively, and they are supporting that because they're using less fuel to do that, it's a no-brainer. But it's one of the things that we don't think about. The log trucks are taking care of that situation. Planting trees, and then using that stored carbon to continue to, make pellets so that people have an easier fuel source that is also using carbon that has been stored up 50 years ago. Thank you.
I love this. And to talk about unification and why it matters at the local level, we have a Republican and a Democrat here who both believe in climate change. The issue that we're facing, especially here on the Northwest of Oregon, is balancing climate change regulation and making sure that we act as a body politic, which is all of Oregon, and frankly, tackle a really nasty issue that not one of us can solve alone. I mean, honestly, does any of you believe that when we got those fancy shower heads, that if you by yourself change that out, you're gonna make a difference? I mean, like, on all new buildings, sure, that makes sense, but like, I didn't believe that when I tried it out, I was gonna look a difference in my water supply. No. Well, I appreciate the analogy with the truckers, because when I was speaking with I was knocking on the door of one of our truckers who goes through Rainier and goes up to Longview. And one of the things they talked about was DEP, which is the thing we add to our detergent in order to make it more fuel efficient, and how expensive that is. And what I'm thinking is, well, how do we create legislation that tackles this as a community issue and doesn't put the onus on one person? You know, just because you happen to work in a more emitting industry, that doesn't mean you have any less of a right to an insecure job. We want everyone to have a secure job. So how do we do this? Well, how about 2 years ago when we were looking in the legislature at passing meaningful climate change reform, we look at funding truck upgrades rather than forcing them to upgrade themselves. Because almost all truck owners own their own small business. They own their truck. They can't afford that degree of capital investment, but these new trucks don't have a used market. You know, I'm talking about pragmatism here. We need to achieve climate change without cutting out the little guy. Thank you. Sorry, not achieve climate change, prevent climate change.
So, climate change, that's a real hot button topic, right? Science is kind of split on it. It's kind of 50 on this side and 50% on that side. So the answers aren't always concrete. And if we look at our climate over thousands and thousands of years, we can see that the climate has changed, right? Sometimes it's been hotter in the past and sometimes it's been colder. 1934, I think, was like the hottest recorded period of time in the United States. We had the Dust Bowl back then. And there were some environmental issues there. I think one good way to manage air quality and climate change is to take care of our forests. Let's make sure that the underbrush is cleared out. Let's make sure that we have good logging practices. Forest fires add a lot of carbon to the air. Just simple. I know that there's a big kick to push people into electric vehicles in the next 7 or 8 years. That's not going to happen. $65,000 to $100,000 for an electric car is not something that the average person can afford. You know, people are struggling to make ends meet right now just because of inflation. And if you want to tell them they have to go buy a $100,000 car so they can get back and forth to work, it's not going to happen. We can't cut our own throats in order to reach for some long way down the road solution to this issue. The technology will catch up. Vehicles will burn less fuel. And we've seen it. If you're, somebody that started driving in the mid-70s compared to the gas economy from then to now. I mean, like, I had a 65 Mustang. That was my first car. I got about 12 miles to the gallon at 37 cents a gallon, right? That was awesome. But now I'm driving a Camry, and it's still a gas engine, but I'm getting 43 highway, Then there are the hybrids. So let the technology catch up before we make that big leap.
Climate's been changing since the climate's been there, and mankind will deal with that the same way we deal with everything: innovation and infrastructure. If we have issues with climate change and they're saying it's making for increased wildfire seasons, well, shoot, it seems that Oregon in the 1930s had thousands of miles of fire roads, fire breaks that they knew to install back then. We fix the problems as they arise. As we look at what's happening with, the call to decrease atmospheric CO2. Well, you can build all the electrical vehicles you want to, but unless you find something other than hydrocarbons to spin the generators, you're really just upstreaming the problem. There is one reliable way to lower atmospheric carbon. It involves planting photosynthesizers. Turns out Mother Nature's had things that could remove carbon from the atmosphere for about 3.8 billion years. I think another thing that we need to do when addressing climate change is understand Are we talking about climate change, or are we talking about something more? It sounds like we want to be able to alter our environment. Well, we're not actually talking about climate change, are we then? We're talking about terraforming. And now we're stuck in an argument with one side saying we're doing terraforming all wrong, and the other side saying we can't do it at all. Well, I'm a futurist. I look at it as, well, looks like we stink at terraforming and we need to get better at it and invest in that type of endeavor. Innovation and infrastructure. That's how humankind gets through anything.
Question is, what should Oregon be doing to address climate change? The short answer is lots. The climate is warming faster than it has in recorded history. We are pumping CO2 into the atmosphere faster than any time since there have been mammals. So what should Oregon be doing about it? We start with what Oregon does very directly. The legislature made a good step in this last session about making sure that vehicles that the state owns and operates, their emissions are taken into account. We need to make sure that we're doing more of that. We need to see this action at every level of government, and we need to make sure that the state is working with counties and local governments to encourage them to take similar actions. We need to make sure that our timber industry, the newer diesel trucks are absolutely better than what we have, but that turnover cycle is slow. We need the state to be encouraging that turnover cycle to happen faster than it does normally. We need to encourage our timber industry in so many ways to make sure that it stays healthy. Because if you're an environmentalist, if you're a progressive, the future you want has more buildings made out of wood and fewer out of concrete, right? There is no fight between the timber industry and the environment. The fight is, there's a small number of wealthy people and companies that have tried to make that a wedge issue, but it's not. We want a healthy timber industry because it's important for the future of a sustainable Oregon.
The next question from the audience is, will you work to lower Oregon taxes, and if so, how?
Where did we start?
So let's go ahead and start with Mr. Soares.
It's a good question. Our state government the funding for our state government is really difficult. Oregon has sort of painted itself into a corner in some ways that most states don't have. The kicker, for example, makes budgeting long-term difficult. I know it's a very popular thing, but I think it makes our state government less efficient, and it makes all the levels of government below that less efficient because they don't operate in isolation. I think answering this question has to be done in relation to a broader picture, because we need to make sure that we can continue to operate a government. The government, we've heard tonight about things we want to do in terms of like fixing Highway 6. Great, absolutely want to do that. We have to pay for it. So I don't have a really good answer to this question outside of saying we need to look at this in terms of the overall picture of the services we're providing and how we budget for that long term. Which way would you like to go?
I would absolutely vote to lower taxes in Oregon. Oregon has the 4th highest per capita taxation in the United States and the 4th most bloated state budget to match. Our state budget right now sits like a fattened calf, over $1 billion in excessive collected taxes kept from the people who created them, the people of Oregon. I view prosperity a little bit differently than some of the more progressive among us. I view prosperity on the thickness of the wallets of the people in my district, not how much money my state has in the coffers, because the state doesn't have its own money. All it has is your money. So if you're gonna sit and say, you know, I want the state to keep more of its money, that's your money. I believe that you guys, at the most local levels possible, have the ability to decide what you're going to spend money on a lot better than the state. The state oftentimes finds itself funding things that, again, are not classical infrastructure. They're trying to call things now infrastructure that are not roads or bridge or dam or improvement of any sort. I think that one of the biggest things we can do is start returning, adding, looking at everything that we do through the lens of, can we add value to what the people of Oregon need? And if not, I believe that the private sector has a lot more success in acting successful policy than the government does.
Fewer taxes for everybody. I made a suggestion a while back on Facebook because we're all looking at this inflation right now, which is a crisis for families. One of the big things that has driven the cost of food, energy, shelter, and everything you pay for up is the cost of fuel, right? So my suggestion was like, hey, while we're in this period of inflation, this crisis, let's drop the gas tax. Let's make it a little bit more affordable for families. Let's make it a little bit more affordable for farmers to run their equipment to help bring down the cost of food. I'm still trying to figure out why seniors 65 and older on a fixed income are paying property tax, especially for a property that they've already paid off. When I was in Washington State, there were people in King County that had lived in their house their entire life, 45, 50 years, paid it off, retired. And now are paying more in property tax than they paid for in the original mortgage and are getting moved out of their houses because they can't afford it. You know, the money that you earn, and we hear about people talking about property rights and they're thinking about their house and their land, but no, everything that you earn, every dime that goes in your pocket is yours. You know, young kids nowadays look at that and they're like, well, it's not like it's your money, it belongs to the government. No, the government wasn't sitting there, you know, with me for 12 hours when I was pushing overtime, you know, to feed my family, to take care of the bills. So we need to look at, you know, lowering taxes. We need to look at what we're spending, you know, before we gain taxes in, which is one reason why we have $1 billion in surplus. No, that money needs to go back to where it belongs, to the pockets of the people that earned it originally. Thank you.
Could you repeat the question, please? I know it was on taxes, but I want to get the phrasing right. Thank you.
Will you work to lower Oregon taxes, and if so, how?
Thank you, Judge. I appreciate that. I am not a tax and spend Democrat. I'm a pragmatic Democrat. If we lower gas taxes, our road conditions are going to get a hell of a lot worse than they already are. Where are loggers going to earn their living? Where are we going to go to attend the doctor's appointment? The entire point of a government is to solve collective action problems. There's three of these. There's personal safety, there's liberty, which is protection, it's slightly different than safety, and there's also prosperity. That's how I view things. I do not want to see raised taxes, especially because we really do have a budget surplus, and we consistently meet those metrics. Part of it is because we are bringing in industry compared to other parts of the nation, but part of it is because, quite frankly, we have a bloated state government who hasn't had an opportunity for inward reflection in a long time. That's part of the reason why we have trifecta. You know, trifecta which is a one party controls every part of government. It's really great in passing policy priorities, but it can be hard, it can be really crummy when it comes to looking at the state government and looking for efficiencies. One way we can fix things is by electing pragmatic Democrats who belong and can be part of this majority caucus and actually do the hard work in looking where we can find efficiencies and spend this money wisely. I mean, I'm not sure what the situation is on the circuit court level, but I know in the county court levels, include which we pay for a lot by our public defender's offices. Our caseloads are, I mean, it's all digital now, but you know, if you print it all out, it'd be miles high. It's inhumane. We're not, because of inefficiencies, we're not able to provide basic liberty, safety, and prosperity.
Thank you. About 2 weeks ago, I started working on a plan with a local CPA. Of course, it's tax season, and people are looking at what they're having to pay, and know that Oregon has never had a revenue problem. Oregon has a spending problem. And what we have developed through this problem, well, it does suit some well. It also has made our tax system extremely difficult to work through. And so the CPA and I are working to compare tax forms from different states to see how we could propose that Oregon change its tax forms so that it would be easier for people. It would make it fairer for people. And the other thing that we are working on is inheritance tax, because inheritance tax right now in the state of Oregon is totally off whack. And so we're working to put forward a bill concerning inheritance tax that would raise the amount of what people would have to pay up to, wouldn't have to pay up to $2 million rather than the $1 million limit that it is right now. So what we need to do is we need to use a little common sense and look at some of these things, and we need to also hold our agencies accountable, and we have to make sure that they're not going to come forward with any more faux sales taxes like they came forward with last time that got defeated, the luxury tax. So.
Okay, the next question from the audience is, how can you make Oregon housing more affordable? And the person who submitted the question wants you to consider in your answer the permitting process and land use laws, if you so choose. And let's go ahead and start with Mr. Gaither and then head south this time.
So we all know that there's an issue with housing. We have a lot of homeless people out there. Okay? Most of those issues, not so much directly related to housing, but substance abuse, mental health issues, and things of that nature. For people that want to build an apartment complex, let's say you're an investor, and you're not like a multi-millionaire, but you got enough to maybe make a 20-unit apartment complex building, okay? When you build that, then you expect to get rent from each one of those tenants on a monthly basis. You have a mortgage to pay. You have, maintenance to pay. You have to pay people to manage the property. Okay, that all requires money. But when the state comes in and says, hey, wait, there's an emergency, we're not going to allow you to charge people rent. Well, you can charge it, but eventually, it'll be 5 or 6 months down the road. So they did this to a lot of property owners. I live in a 4-unit apartment complex. My landlord's 78 years old, and he's got cancer. There's only 1 unit inhabited right now because everybody else stopped paying the rent and eventually moved out. No one's going to want to invest in building apartment complexes, building multifamily units, unless they're going to get a return on their investment. So that has to be protected. So let's drop some of the regulations. Let's ensure, and encourage landowners to build and rent, and ensure that they don't lose on their investment. There was money held for over a year that was supposed to be relieved for these people. There was no reason to hold that.
I think one of the biggest issues we have with the housing crisis are remnants from policies that started in the 1980s through the 1990s to combat urban sprawl that was never happening. We in Oregon have fairly much flat, livable land. The amount of land available for building and expanding is relatively flat. We're not allowing new neighborhoods, new developments to be built at the same rates other states are. This has led to entire neighborhoods being taken down and apartment complexes going up. We have dear friends whose son has a good job, he has a career, and he's contemplating moving somewhere else because he can't afford to buy a home in the state he was born and raised in. And it's because of these land use issues. A lot of people don't realize when they look at a map of Oregon, they think that's Oregon. No, 48% of that is Oregon. 52% of the remainder of that is held by the federal government outside the Equal Protections of Laws Clause. There's no eastern states where the federal government is hanging on to the number of lands as can. It's pretty simple. If you need to increase revenue through property taxes, you can either go with a low rate, high volume rate, which is where most states that have a growth-based model do it. They want more revenue through property taxes, you sell more properties, you make more properties available for development. Our state has a low volume, high rate model where the rates are gonna keep climbing until they decide to give us our land back and allow Oregonians to inhabit Oregon.
The first answer to this is build more of it. You want cheaper houses, you build more housing. We need to work with investors, certainly, but we need to work with private industry in all sorts of sectors to make sure that we are building more housing, especially workforce-oriented housing. This is an interesting question that relates to the things we heard earlier tonight about local versus state control. And if you want to say things like rental property rules are going to be managed at a lower level, then you're not going to be able to address the impact that that has on the costs at a state level. I think we need to look at this top to bottom. There is no answer that's going to solve all of it, but the regulations are absolutely a problem. I live on basically the southern end of Columbia County, and I have a good friend who lives across the street, basically. Her address is a different branch of the mountain, but across the street. And she's in Multnomah County, and she had a fire, she had to rebuild her house. And it was a nightmare. If she had lived 200 feet this way, her life would have been so much easier for 3 years of getting this process done. I think, we need to make sure that that is something that works for everybody in Oregon and not, across the street is going to make your life harder.
Thank you. This is one of the things that I worked on in the legislature, and I came to some conclusions concerning it. And one of the things is that we have to look at the structure of our permitting process and the fees that we charge for our permitting process. I know one developer was going to put in a 21-unit apartment house on 1 1/3 acres, and he had already paid out $250,000 in permits and fees to be able to do that, and it wouldn't pencil out for him. So now they've got a developer coming in there, and the same piece of property is going to put a 3-story, 47-unit apartment complex in there because he can't make it pencil out any other way. One of the things we have to look at is our zoning. A lot of areas are trapped between the forest and the farm and the water, and we don't have the land to be able to build on. That's another consideration that needs to be taken into, those zoning things. We do have antiquated laws concerning planning and development that also need to be looked at. They are what are hampering a lot of what our building challenges are right now.
And the other thing that we need to look at is our systems development charges, what it costs for the city to provide sewer and water to those properties, and how are the people going to be able to meet those demands. When we put one building in, it was $60,000 that they had to pay up front in order to get the sewer there, because the sewer didn't go out that far. Okay, then it meant that much money for the water too. So we need to look at all of those things. We need to look at options for people to be able to pay for these things, maybe over time, borrow from the municipality so they can get it done, or other options so that these things can be made possible. I'm sorry.
Thank you. I see there being two issues with the housing crisis. The first is homelessness and the second is development. On the homelessness side, I think we need to invest in shelters again. Full stop. I mean, what we're seeing today is that we took all this money from our shelter programs and we said, we are going to have a housing first model. This is great. Housing first is great. It means that anyone who comes to you to get a shelter over their head, we are going to find a place for them. Great idea. The problem is people don't know where these nonprofits are for them to get this relief. So I think we need to invest in shelters again. And then tell all of our nonprofits that we're funding in part with state grants and say, hey, you want to find new clients? Go to these shelters. People want help. Be available to them. Increase accessibility. The second thing I think that we can do to help how the housing crisis is development. Most recently, that rent relief bill that, it had some issues, but it passed the Senate unanimously in its most recent iteration. We're not going to say get rid of a bill that had a meaningful impact on everyone's lives when it passes unanimously. But regardless, the crisis of COVID-19 is going away, slowly, but it is. So what can we do now and into the future? Well, frankly, I think we need to establish minimum time requirements to get a permit. If we want to talk about government efficiency, we need to give a stick. Counties, states, municipalities, when you get a permit request, you have a minimum time to follow up, and if it's required a site visit, you have to attend that site visit within, let's start with a month, because that's a large ask for these people, and then bring it down to 2 weeks. The second thing I think we need to do is, really look at our fee structure. Fees are locally controlled in Oregon, mostly. So what we need to do is, I think, provide local agencies a bit of a grant, a bit of an incentive. You have a carrot and a stick. You get this grant funding if you meet efficiency targets. The second thing we do is, yes, we need to invest in our zoning code and what we can do to change it. It has been around since the 70s and it needs some reform. Thank you.
All right, panel, the next question is, what will you do to help develop your region's small business community? Please include policies, programs, or other ideas you have to help small business owners. And let's start with Mr. Lady and go north.
I'm honored. All right. So, I mentioned earlier in my opening remarks that I work as a patient coordinator for a local dentist who are in his own small business. Well, there's only one provider there. Sometimes we're lucky enough to have a hygienist, the people who clean your teeth. I was laid off because of COVID-19 and because of state crackdowns, right? I spoke with my state legislator at the time, and she helped me out with unemployment insurance. By the way, it's an insurance program. It's your right to claim it. Not only did she help me through that process when it was really going through a horrible time, she pointed me in the right direction. Our small business development centers. Columbia County recently pulled together some resources from all of our different areas to fund one. That's amazing. But when I'm looking to Clasconon West, the area I will be representing, hopefully, we're dealing with urban blight and serving on an urban renewal district. What we do is we think, how do we invest taxpayer funds in order to help small businesses? Well, one of the best things that we can do, and I think we've seen this happen time and time again, is say, we will give you this funding, We will either give you a loan that's amazing, it's a forgivable loan if you meet some certain targets, employment targets, or we are going to give you grant funding because what you're doing, in particular with your small business, it could really go a long way to reversing the blight on our streets. Make our communities more inviting and attract more development. What I think we need to do for small businesses is have a statewide program to invest in these. You know, it's called opportunity grants. And I think this is what we need to do. Thank you.
I spent several years working on the Economic Development Council for Tillamook County. And I have seen that we can take and provide an education and create new jobs, new careers for people. We got the truck driving training in there. And then economic development provided scholarships so that we could train truck drivers, especially when we were in a place when we really needed them to keep our economy going. It's very successful. It's been moved, the trainer has been moved up to Clatsop County, and it's been also loaned to Lincoln County so that it can increase the number of people who can have a job and go to work and earn a living wage. The other thing is that we really encourage the SBDC, the small business. They have been providing classes for people on how to run their businesses, how to start their businesses, how to build a business plan, and then where are you going to put it, where are you going to locate it, and then buoy you up when you may have problems. And I think that funding our small business development agencies is extremely important. Plus, they have come out with new ways to take some of our truck farmers and our people that are providing food and coming to a central area so that they can distribute their food and sell their food from a central area. And that has been very successful. And you have seen that in Clatsop County also. And I think that that is an idea that needs to expand because we have a lot of people out there that are farming and developing and providing food for people. So I could go on and on.
This is such a great question because small businesses, obviously they're a big economic driver, right? But they're also such a key part of actually making our communities. Like what gives your town the character that it has? It's all those small businesses. At the risk of being redundant, the Small Business Development Center model is fabulous. It's doing a really good job where it's taken hold. And one of my first efforts here would be to talk to the counties and figure out what help they need to encourage that. Because it really has been very successful where it's taken hold. In addition to that, I think you look at infrastructure issues and things like broadband access for more and more businesses are becoming crucial infrastructure in order to be able to run that business. This is true for individual workers, but it's increasingly true for entire businesses. You can't do that effectively in the 21st century without having access to that sort of network. I think those would be my focuses. I think beyond that, it's a question of making sure that there's enough economic prosperity in the communities, regardless of where the bulk of the money, if you look at it statistically or whatnot, comes from. If you have people in South County who are coming into Portland, if you have people in North County who are doing natural resource work, regardless, you need to make sure that we have local support for these small businesses because that's where people live, and that's where you want to make sure that you have a community that is nice to live in.
As we talk about small business growth and development, we have to look at it through the things that either restrict or ease the flow of a business developing. I think I agree with, statements on both sides that these small business models where prospective venture capitalists learn how to start their business, learn how to submit their documentation, have everything in order. Past that, the most that the government can do for these small businesses is get their hands out of their pocketbooks, to stop taking so much. An economy is a lot like a wire. How much electricity you're able to flow through a wire before it starts getting hot and melting down is measured in ohms, resistance. There is a lot of resistance to economic growth in Oregon right now. Speaking very specifically, if I had my option of one thing to go after, would be the CAT tax, or the gross receipts tax. That's an income tax, that's a sales tax in disguise. You're gonna have a cost of doing business tax that does nothing to help businesses grow. I think that's what I would do. I would get government out of people's way, because largely I think that small businesses are capable of growing themselves. And outside of the government making sure that everybody has equal avenues for participation and equal access to training and avenues for success, I think that when you have a government that picks sides in commerce, you have the beginnings of fascism. And I don't want that.
So I remember a few years back, I was kind of asked a similar question. This was in 2012. And so 70 to 75% of business in the state on average is where we're at. These are small business. They're not the large corporations. We're talking about small business. So people, when let's say they open up a burrito stand, or they open up a small flower store, or if their dream was to always have like a fly fishing tackle supply store with an archery shop in the back, I don't know, we have that. Really nice. They're looking at investing in that business. It takes a lot of money to get that business going, and pretty much almost all the time they're putting everything into it. They're putting their lives and their livelihoods, their properties on the line. So why is it that we don't have a tax break for those people for the first 2 to 3 years that they're operating? That's what's going to make or break a business. We want these businesses to grow. If you let them go into a tax-free environment for 2 to 3 years, they're going to have an opportunity. But government comes in, they see that tree going up, there's a couple branches, and they're like, oh, branches, snip, 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 that goes into my pocket, right? I talked about reducing the fuel taxes temporarily to help citizens out in this time of crisis. Well, guess what? The roads still look like hell, and we got $1 billion surplus. So why do the roads look like that? Obviously, it's not a revenue issue. It's a spending issue, and it's a prioritization issue. If you got a hangnail on your little finger, you're not going to ignore the spot where your leg got just amputated at the knee. You have to triage these things and prioritize what you're going to do as far as boosting the economy. You have to prioritize it. That's got to be job one, right? We can't solve any of these issues that we're dealing with right now without the money to do that. And if we don't have a successful small business community out there in the state, the revenues will drop.
Okay, we have time for 2 more audience-generated questions. And the next to the last question is, how do you think the urban versus rural divide can be narrowed in Oregon? And we'll start with Ms. Weber and just go the normal way.
Thank you. You know, that's something that is on my mind all of the time, because we in rural Oregon feel that the metro area is determining what money we get, what money we don't get, how we are going to farm, how we're going to use our land, how we're going to be able to manage our forests. It always seems that the metro area, the urban area is telling us how we're going to do these things. Well, I think that what we need is to continue to have strong representation from this area and from rural Oregon that is going to make the difference to make sure that people are listening to what's happening. It's got to be us going there and being the strong advocate with common sense as our best ally and putting that forward so that we can mitigate some of these things that are happening. You know that everybody wants to have a house to live in, and you know that the metro philosophy is density. Well, we've got to be able to portray our feelings about density and our feelings about owning property and a home, and make that heard and understood. And sometimes it's the loudest voice that gets it done.
I live on the coast. We're purple. Right? We have a lot, not just here, but also here in Columbia City and down South County. We have a lot of urbanites who treat this as a bedroom community. Not because they don't love the culture here, because that's where they found a job. Yes, there is an urban-rural divide, but here's the thing. The metro counties, the three of them, they can't get a single piece of legislation passed that is meaningful, especially one that has to do with taxes, without our support. We are not in a position where fighting and screaming from the top of our lungs is the best way to put forward meaningful change for our communities, right? I've been working to improve people's lives for about 7 years now. Well, longer if you include some of my volunteer service, but politically for 7 years. And you know, when you're knocking on doors, when you're talking with city councilors, when you're advocating for education reform in the state government, you don't win any votes by crying and telling your sob story. You win votes by explaining earnestly what's happening, not making them out to be that, not making them out to be a villain, making friends in unexpected places. You know, as a moderate Democrat, for me, that would be the Republican caucus, and it would be Democratic leadership. You gotta make friends with everyone. Otherwise, who's gonna listen? You know, young children, whining at the top of your lungs. Eventually, if you attune to all their needs, you realize that you just gotta ignore them for a little bit. They'll quiet down, and then they get some affection. They get a reward, right? We have to be a little, as rural representatives, we have to be a little buzzer. We have to be a little fly swirling around people's heads, around these decision makers' heads, and keep whispering to them, and keep reminding them this is who we're fighting for, and negotiate, not be the loudest voice in the room.
So one issue is that we don't do the same type of work in the rural areas and on the coast as they do in the cities. In the cities, we got large corporations. We got Microsoft. We got Nike. And we got places that are even bigger than that hire thousands and thousands of employees. The disconnect comes when you start punishing our farmers who are in rural areas made by decisions that live in the inner city. So they gerrymandered the district lines. There is absolutely no doubt about it. We took them to court. They did the same thing in Washington and the court agreed. Okay, you don't stretch district lines across not just geographical lines, but across income lines. Okay, our farmers are the most abused people in this state. The people that had the highest number of votes and that passed the legislation, which required migrant workers to get paid time and a half after 40 hours, did not understand that they're working on a piece rate, right? So if you pick a crate or you pick enough flats in an hour, you're making 30 bucks an hour. Now it's going to be 45 bucks an hour. It's driving your wages up. The average wage of the migrant worker for a 5-month work period is $28,953. The average family farmer of 4, which most farms are in this state, $19,900. Okay, so they're making less money. Everything that gets taxed for them is money out of their pocket. These people need tax relief more than anybody because they are feeding us. They are feeding us. These are critical workers, and the decisions being made that impact their farms, that impact our grocery bills and the supply chain of food that we're going to need, because there's going to be a fertilizer shortage next year, big time. Those people need to be supported.
They'll divide you as a person in half if you get them the chance. The urban-rural divide, conservative-liberal divide, progressive. We can either decide to be united and free, or we can decide to be divided and conquered. I think it's a pretty simple solution, is you deal with things on the individual basis based on their merits. We have a lot of issues where I say that Portland perhaps could be influenced again a lot by rural Oregon. I think a lot of you who grew up here remember a time when the relationship between Portland and the rest of the state could almost be viewed as symbiotic, where the attitude was a little bit different. It wasn't a question of pushing urban policy out into the rural areas or pushing urban policy back from the rural areas. It's about coming up with the best decision making regarding the public administration for where you are at. I'm a big fan of localism because I think it's a really bad idea for people in the Portland metro area to be making decisions about Scappoose and the Gateway westward. I also think it's a bad idea for people who live in rural communities who know nothing about the complexities in a large metropolitan area to be pushing too hard on policy. I think if people bothered to educate themselves as the intricacies of the issues, we wouldn't find ourselves so easily divided into heads or tails argument, rural versus urban. I represent Oregonians, and I understand that Oregonians come in all colors, shapes, sizes, and they live in all kinds of different places, and I intend to treat them as such.
I was in a meeting 3 weeks ago with the Rural Democrats Caucus, and the chair of the caucus said, we will get all the help we need from the Central Party. They will give us all the help we need, but they don't understand us. I think in a lot of ways that's the same problem we see everywhere. We're all Oregonians. People in Portland don't want us to fail. Nobody in Portland wants to see Columbia County do poorly. We don't need their help. We don't need their charity. We're not looking for them to come in and take care of us. But we need to work together as a state, as a broader community, to be able to say, yeah, let's find out what's going to work for everyone in Oregon, everyone in the community. But the reality is, we don't all have the same needs. Yes, we should say we need to treat everybody equally, but that means different things for different people. If you live in Portland, you don't need any help with broadband. You are covered. If you live in Columbia County, you're in a different story, right? If you live in Portland, you don't need too much concern about your infrastructure. There's some questions about bridges, but overall, you're mostly doing okay. Out here, different story, right? They don't have to worry about highways to the coast. We need to be able to say, we're going to work together and find out how do we address these issues. Where is the appropriate level of control? What does need to be moved to counties? What needs to be at something broader level so that we can make sure infrastructure is provided in ways that are going to connect people more than separate them? And the fundamental answer is you get in a room and you talk to people. You have conversations with people. That's how you bridge all of these divides.
Okay, this is the last audience-generated question. It's the last question tonight. I want to thank all of you for your attention and for your thoughtful answers here tonight. The last question is, what can be done about out-of-state timber companies that have locked the public out of Oregon lands that have historically been open to the public? And we'll
we'll start with Mr. Soares.
Yeah, this is a really important question. I have a trail down the end of my road that we go walking on pretty regularly, and access to it has varied over time. And just in the years I've lived here, it's been, there's been nice signs up for here's how to hike this trail, and then there's been no trespassing signs. This is land that everyone should have access to. We have made various deals at various times with the timber companies to make sure that they provide access. And largely, they don't live up to those deals. We need to hold them accountable. In most cases, this is a question of enforcing these deals that have already been made. The timber companies in Oregon get, compared to our lumber producing neighbors to the north and the south, they get a really nice deal here in Oregon in ways that are, you know, maybe problematic in some ways, but part of that has been about you have to preserve this access, and they have not done so. We just need to be able to say, look, we made this deal, you're not living up to your end of the bargain, do so, or, you know, the other end of the deal is going to change too.
We can't, as a people, have a government that changes rules or expectations midstream. We have to have policies that are held, especially when issues of public lands are brought into question. I think it's a pretty simple thing, really. If the companies who have been given custodianship of this land aren't going to stick with the agreement that they made, then that agreement should come to an end, and a different corporation that is willing to follow those rules can come on in and mind it for us. But I will see nobody managing that land before I see everyday Oregonians locked off of it and these corporations starting to act like it's their property. That is not your property. That is the property of the people of Oregon. I don't think it's a really big issue. I think that if the appropriate bodies made the appropriate stand and said, no, stop that, these people who are getting a sweetheart deal would capitulate, because what choice do they have? I think that the right of every Oregonian is to be able to go up into these logging roads and see what this wilderness is that we are trying so hard to protect. Because if you cannot claim to be an environmentalist if you have policies that do not let people get out and interact with their environment. So they will either honor their agreements, or they will find themselves replaced by someone who will honor those agreements.
So this has been the subject that's near and dear to my heart. I spend a lot of time on Lewis and Clark timberlands. I mean, a lot of time. Like, any minute I get a chance to get out of town and escape and get my head set straight up in the woods, whoop, I'm on Lewis and Clark. Warehouser, on the other hand, though, you have to, like, get a little item, rub it for luck, have your credit card ready, and at midnight on a certain date, if you're not the first guy there, you're shut out, right? Same land. And I can understand why they're putting gates up. That makes sense, especially during fire season. Lewis and Clark relaxes those regulations later on. But who closed down the beach during COVID? That's state lands. The city decided, and the governor decided that, hey, let's cram everybody onto a 10-foot wide boardwalk for their outside exercise and leave a 150-yard wide beach with a stiff breeze coming off the ocean blowing away the COVID virus restricted, okay? I like seeing timber companies opening their lands to citizen use. I think that if they're getting that huge tax break, that they should drop the fees and make it easier for everybody to enjoy that. And I also believe that during the summer and fire season, that those need to be walk-in, mountain bike, hike, horseback, something that's not going to spark a fire. The other reason these gates are closed is because of the homeless people. They're gonna close Knack Creek Campground and gate that off state lands because it was completely trashed by over 200 homeless people. Everybody talks about the environment, protecting the environment, in the air and everything else, but they're ignoring these homeless camps. They're frequently right next to our salmon and steelhead streams and are getting heavily polluted. So that's my answer.
Thank you. You know, to the question about out-of-state timber interests, that has been one of the major changes over the past 3 decades or so in the state of Oregon. We have gone from a state where almost every single swath of privately owned forest land is owned by actual Oregon residents. And the vast majority of those were actually, you know, small businesses, medium, you know, higher middle class families and below. What has happened over the past while, you know, because we have fairly permissive timber regulations, it has become very keen. Wise people on Wall Street have figured out that, oh my goodness, this is a natural resource that every single person in the world is going to need. This is a growth opportunity. Let's dive in and pitch in and let's buy it all up. Now, I do want to say that living on and right next to private timberland, we do see good things happen in our community. You know, recently we had in one of our small towns, we had a company who's fairly large sell at well below market rates prime timberland to the city government in order to relocate all of our emergency response services above the tsunami line, right? There are still charitable things happening. But yes, things like failure to uphold your agreements on privately managed but publicly owned forest land is huge, and we need to honor those agreements. I'm a hunter, you know, and one of the things that we've seen happening because of all this transfer of private lands to out-of-state corporations is all of a sudden we can't hunt and we can't keep these elk populations under control anymore because we don't have access to this private forest land that we used to. You know, it's a tricky thing. You know, this is private property rights, right? No one wants to see the government come in with a door knocking for the police saying, hey, no one has access to your land anymore. But at the same time, there are agreements that we need to enforce.
This always brings up a lot of questions to me. The first question I have is, who made these agreements? What are they? Do we know the scope of these agreements? Who gave whoever made these agreements the authority to do it? Where is it memorialized so that we can see a standardized agreement so that we can know what's actually happening? I know that private timber companies say things like, we have liability issues. We spray at times. We don't want people in there if we're spraying. Log trucks are in there. Those sorts of things are happening there, and I can understand why they wouldn't want people in there at those times. But the big question is, what agency, who made these decisions, and why are these decisions being impacted on us so that we can't enjoy that land any longer? It's a question that I have pondered and I have asked, and I have not had a reasonable answer. One of the things that this makes me want to do is once again look at what kind of a tax break these folks are getting. What is that doing to the rest of the public land and the forest land? And then what agency has the authority to be able to do this?
So we're going to just end with a 1-minute summary, any final parting statements. And I think actually Drew has not gone first yet, so I'll let him have first chance. 1 minute.
I'd like to thank everybody that came out and visited with us today. I think it's fantastic to be seeing increased engagement on a bipartisan level between parties and coming out Because I think that one of the biggest things, as many people who have said up here, we have to start talking to each other again. We can't simply play this out like a full contact, red versus blue, full contact sport, because it's not good for our state. It's not good for any aspect of what we're trying to do here, because as immortalized by the great Zac Brown band, we're all in the same boat, fishing in the same hole. And I think it's really important for us to remember that, although we are going to possibly, any one of these folks up here, we could have a policy decision or a disagreement on an idea with, but we need to come to a place where we're respecting each other as individuals and understanding that the sole goal of everything that we're going to try to accomplish is to increase the greatness of our state and increase the prosperity of our fellow Oregonians. So I thank you all for coming out here and hopefully celebrating the beginning of a new political climate in Oregon.
I really enjoyed tonight. I hope you have too. I really liked being able to hear from everybody up here. I've been taking notes. I heard something I loved from everybody up here. Certainly there's people I agree with more than others, but there are great ideas everywhere. And I think everybody here benefits from hearing from more voices. Everybody here, including everybody here. Also, Celeste, my daughter would be very happy that there was candy on the back table, so whoever did that, thank you. Yeah, this has been really great. I'm looking forward to talking to all of you more, and I hope that I can find more ways to earn your vote. Thanks.
Thank you. I also want to thank you for having us here tonight and giving us an opportunity to speak in front of you. And I want to say that I think that one of the most important things that has to go to Salem and has to stay in Salem is common sense. I think that unintended consequences have made it really difficult in this state for a lot of different economic industries. And I think that common sense, looking ahead, seeing what it is that will be impacted by the laws is extremely, extremely important. And of course, I think I can do that.
I want to thank you all so much for coming out tonight, and for everyone else here who showed up with a sense of representative. I think when you look at the people who are here, some travel all the way across this district. For some of us, this is our backyard. And I think it's really impressive how many of y'all showed up tonight. I really do. Because as we mentioned earlier, a new era of politics over in Oregon. Every single one of us are talking about not so much party, but about how are we going to work with our coalitions, including the other party, to get stuff done. I came in and I talked a little bit about what I see happening in Classic Isle West over into my own district. I'm sorry, I won't have the opportunity to represent us here in Columbia City, but I promise I will, just not in official capacity when I am in the legislature. I think what I want to end on tonight, though, isn't so much housing, healthcare, education, economic development. I think what I want to end on here tonight is a profound sense of gratitude, because I think we're going places. I really do. Thank you.
Let's stop fighting each other. Let's do that. Let's start there. Let's stop teaching kids that they're different. Let's tell them that they're the same, okay? There's been issues in the last 3 years with COVID mandates, government shutdown. The Capitol is still closed to the public. I don't like the idea that we're holding legislative sessions without easy access for the public to the state capitol. Okay? We need to make our leaders in Salem understand that mandates go up, not down. Okay? We're tired of having orders handed to us. We're tired of being told what to do. And we're tired of people being threatened, intimidated, and coerced if they don't agree. So we have to have a civil government. That's critical. Let's get all the drugs off of our streets so we can, A, help the homeless and start saving the lives of our teenagers who are dying from this poison. okay? And third, we need to start protecting our kids from some of the materials that are coming into the schools from the OEA who denies that they're even doing it, okay? I am concerned about the safety of children. 3 teachers in one day, March 22nd, were arrested for 6 crimes against minors. I looked through the records, I found 29 other arrests in 4 years. That has got to stop. We need to stop sexualizing our children and protect them.
Well, I want to thank all of you who stayed to the very end. We appreciate it. And I really want to thank all of our candidates for your time and your travel and just investing in our community. We really, really appreciate that. And stay around for a few minutes, eat up the food. If you feel like donating, please do. And thank you, Judge Jennifer Grant.